This is the second part of 6.3. We're going to talk about using our trig identities and what we used yesterday with our all students take calculus. Remember that? And we're going to evaluate trig functions in different areas on our unit circle and on the coordinate graph. So you'll see in a second. But when I talk about reciprocal, guys, reciprocal means to flip. So if you have the sine of something, the reciprocal is cosecant. Everybody remember that? Okay, these two go together. So do you see how the reciprocal of sine is cosecant? So if you have cosecant, it's 1 over sine. If you have secant, it's 1 over whatever the cosine is. Cotangent is 1 over tangent. Another way that you can look at these tangent functions and cotangent is sine over cosine or cosine over sine. And we'll talk about this more. We'll apply this more later on as we go through. These are called Pythagorean identities at the bottom here. This we will use more later on. This is not the easiest thing in the world, and I understand that. But these three Pythagorean identities are super, super, super important when we're solving and evaluating trig functions. Why do you think they're called Pythagorean identities? It's kind of similar. You guys see that they're squared? All right, it has a relationship to the Pythagorean theorem, and we'll go over that, but we don't have to worry about it right now. All right, if you guys are asked a question like this, this is telling you more information than you can even imagine. Okay, as we go through, it says if the tangent of theta is 2 over 3, and theta is in quadrant 3, find cosine. So let's talk about what tangent means. Tangent. We talked about yesterday. You guys may not remember, you may remember, but tangent is what letter over what letter? Y over X. Okay? And remember, I told you that when we were talking at the beginning of this lesson yesterday, we had our X value and our Y value, how far we go left and right from the origin, how far we go up and down from the origin. And then we have our R, which is the hypotenuse. R is always what kind of a number? Positive. Very good. So let's talk about the information that they gave us here and what we know given this information. Tangent is 2 over 3. So if I have to have an X value, a Y value, and an R value, what two numbers do I already know just by the statement tangent of theta is 2 over 3? What do I already know about X, Y, and R if I know that the tangent of theta is 2 over 3? Y is how much? 2, and X is 3. So think about this, guys. If you have a triangle, and it's in quadrant 3, so it's down here. If I know that Y and X are 2 and 3, I can find the hypotenuse, can't I? Because Y and X are the legs of my triangle. Yes? No? Okay. Another thing that is important that you guys need to understand, you have to understand. Once you figure out this first part, right? They told me this bit of information. The second thing that they tell me is really important because they told me where the angle that I'm looking at lies. They tell me where the angle that I'm looking at, where it actually lies. And the only reason you really need to know that is because you need to know your sines. What I mean by that is, right, all students take calculus. In the first quadrant, all 6 trig functions are what? Positive. In the second quadrant, what's the only thing that's positive? No, okay, but the trig functions. Sine and cosecant. In the third quadrant, what's the only thing positive? What begins with T? Tangent, and its reciprocal, which is cotangent. And in the fourth quadrant, what's the only thing that's positive? Cosine and secant. So when the first thing that they tell me is that the tangent is 2 over 3, is that positive or negative? It's positive. So that means it's either in the first quadrant. Can it be in the second quadrant? No, because what's the only thing positive in the second quadrant? Sine and its reciprocal. Could it be in the third quadrant? Yes. What does T mean? tangent and cotangent. That means it could be here. Could it be in the fourth quadrant? No, because the only thing positive is cosine and secant. So the second thing tells me where the angle lies. Where is this angle that we're talking about? It's in quadrant 3. It's down here, right? So the reason that this is important, guys, is what is the x value and what is the y value if you're in the third quadrant? If I go left and down, what do you know about x and what do you know about y? They're both negative. Good. But given that first piece of information that they told you, that tangent was 2/3, would you have known that they were both negative? No. The reason that you know that is because they tell you those pieces of information. So math-wise, I haven't had to do anything. I haven't had to computationally figure anything out. I just had to use my brain a little bit. And we're going to practice this more. I know this is a lot. And you guys are like, wait, what? But if I'm going to try and find r now, I say x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Well, what's x? -3. What's y? -2 equals r squared. So -3 squared is 9. -2 squared is 4 equals r squared. So 13 equals r squared. How do I get r? Square root of 13. Okay, that's my r. R is the square root of 13. Now we still have not answered this question. Give me 1 second and then we'll answer it. All right, so now that I have this figured out, I can answer the question that's finally being asked. What is the cosine of theta? What is the cosine of theta? So what we need to remember from that first slide that we talked about yesterday, sine of theta is y over r. Cosine of theta is x over r. Tangent of theta, y over x. Remember that? Remember seeing that, talking about it? The reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So what would it be? What over what? R over y. Good. The secant of theta would be what? R over x. The cotangent of theta would be x over y. Now, they didn't ask me to find all 6 trig functions, but you could because you have the little information now that you need. They asked me for cosine. So the cosine of theta, you guys would say, cosine of theta equals what over what? What kind of 3? -3 over what? Square root of 13. Can I leave it like that? No. So multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 13. So your cosine is -3 root 13 over 13. We're going to do a bunch of problems like that. And at first, you guys are going to be like, oh, no. This is what you need to memorize. You need to memorize these ratios. Because finding the x, the y, and the r is easy. It's the Pythagorean theorem. It's how many did I go left and right? How many did I go up and down? You find the r, and then you just plug it into these ratios. It's remembering what the ratios are that can be confusing. So let's go. Okay, secant. Let's write this down again. Let's write all these down. Sine. Sine of theta is what over what? Y over r. Cosine of theta is x over r. Good. Tangent of theta is y over x. Good. So sine, the reciprocal is cosecant, is what over what? R over y. Good. Cosine, the reciprocal is secant, so it's what? R over x. Good. And then cotangent of theta is x over y. All right, we go with that? If I were you, I'd write that for every single time so you're like, okay, so what did they tell me in the beginning of this problem? Secant is what? 2. So secant is 2 over what? No. What number's underneath here? So secant is 2 over 1. So the first thing you have to do when you do these problems is find your x, your y, and your r. They will always tell you 2 of them. What do we already know? R is 2. And I know it's positive 2 because r is always, 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 always positive. And I know that x is 1. I'm not sure if it's positive or negative yet. I got to figure out. But I got to look still. So the first thing we're going to do, based on what they've told us, is all students take calculus. So with this first piece of information, they told me that the secant is 2. First of all, is secant being 2? Is 2 a positive number or a negative number? It's positive. So it could be in the first quadrant, yes. Because everything in the first quadrant is positive. Second quadrant. What's positive in the second quadrant? Sine and cosecant. So can this be here? No. In the third quadrant, what's positive? Tangent and cotangent. So is it there? No. We're talking about secant. This is secant right here. In the fourth quadrant, what's positive? Cosine and secant. So it could be in those two places. The first piece of information will always let you mark off 2 quadrants. The second piece of information is what really helps you narrow it down. They're telling you that the angle is in what quadrant? It's in quadrant 4. So what that is telling you guys is in quadrant 4, what is my x value and what is my y value for sines? If I started here at the origin, how would I get into quadrant 4? I'd go positive, I'd go to the right, and then I'd go where? Negative. So x is positive, y is negative. So x is positive 1, and y, whatever we find out to be, what do I have to put in front of it? A negative sign. Does that make sense? That's how we do that. We're just going to practice this a whole bunch, I promise. So I have x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Well, what's my x value? 1. So 1 squared plus, do we know what y is? No, we'll figure it out. What's 1 squared? Plus y squared equals 4. Minus 1 from both sides. Y squared equals 3. So what's y equal? Square root of 3. So I put it up here. And what kind of square root of 3 does it equal? Negative, but we figured that out already. So if I want to know the 5 other trig functions, right? The 5 other trig functions. Well, sine. Sine is what over what? It's y over r. So what's my y value? Negative square root of 3. What's my r value? Perfect. So if my sine is negative root 3 over 2, what's my cosecant going to be? 2 over negative root 3. Can I leave root 3 in the bottom? Rationalize. So it happens to be negative 2 root 3 over 3. I already know what the secant is. The secant is 2 over 1. So what's the cosine? 1 over 2. Good. Tangent is y over x. Well, what's your y value? What's your x value? Negative square root of 3 over 1. So that means my cotangent is 1 over negative root 3. Can I have root 3? Nope. So it's negative root 3 over 3. The computation behind this, the hardest thing you're going to do is the Pythagorean theorem. It's memorizing these trig functions and then figuring out which quadrant we're talking about. And I promise you, we'll work on these the next couple days. That make sense? Okay, next 2 things that I want to talk to you about. Area of a triangle. If I gave you a right triangle, pretend this is a right triangle. It's the prettiest right triangle you've ever seen. What's the area of a triangle?
Base times height divided by 2.
Okay, base times height divided by 2. Or 1/2 base times height, right? That works with a right triangle because this is your height. This is your base. We are not talking about right triangles here. We're going to talk about the area of a triangle, and they're going to give you 2 side lengths and an included angle. So if I gave you a triangle like this, okay, I know it's not a right triangle because you don't see what? You don't see the little right angle thing. So if I told you this was 17, this was 24, and this was 28, and I told you that this angle right here was 38 degrees, right? This formula, I have to use 2 of the sides and the angle that's included. That means the angle in between. So what information do I use? What 3 numbers? 17, 24, and 38 what? Degrees. The reason I use 38 degrees is because it's what? In between 17 and 24. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay, so the way that we would work them out. A lot of times they only give you two sides and the angle in between, so they make it real easy for you. But sometimes they don't, so just pay attention to what they give you. To find the area of this triangle, I can't use base times height because I don't have the height. It's not a right triangle. So your formula would be just like this. Area equals. All right, what's one of the sides? 10 times, what's the other side? 3 times the sine, you always use sine, of the angle in between. What's the angle in between? And I do what with all of that? Divide it by 2. Now, in your calculator, guys, in order for you to get this answer correct, the numerator has to be in parentheses. Or you can do the numerator, hit equals, and then hit divided by 2. But if you don't, what will happen is the calculator will divide the sine of 120 divided by 2, then multiply it by 10 times 3. So all you're doing is multiplying the top, hit enter, then hit divided by 2. What's your answer? All right, so when we work this out, it works out to about 12.99 centimeters squared. Hang on. Shh.
I have to change the mode.
Make sure you're in degrees. Yep, you're good. So Brandon, do parenthesis 10 times 3 times the sine 120. Close your parenthesis. Divided by 2. Okay, so yes, full week next week. So guys, listen. The area of a triangle, when they give you two sides and the angle where? The angle in, come on. Look, if I say this is 14, this is 24, and this is 19, and I say this angle is 54 degrees. What 3 numbers am I using? 14, 24, and 54 degrees. Why am I using 54 degrees? Because that's the angle that's in between. So you would literally just say, okay, the area is, I don't even know if this will work out, I just made it up. 14 times 24 times the sine of that angle in between divided by 2. It's literally that simple. If they give you more information than you need, then just make sure you're picking the angle that's in between the two sides. Sound good? Okay, tomorrow and Thursday, we're going to be doing a lot of these problems to get your mind working. So make sure you have a calculator.